Hello everybody! Welcome back to another episode of the Elm tutorial guide. We are on episode 7, I believe. Episode 7, I think. It's been a bit since I recorded one of these. Today we're back for the settings tab, which you can find down here. Let me just put this up down here. Yeah, settings tab right here next to initial and summary, which we will also tackle today. The settings tab, or level settings tab, basically covers all of the possible settings your level could have, from starting sun to objectives, which is the main one, seed bank, and minigames. So we're going to be taking a look at all of it, starting from the top to the bottom. First we have the level definition. Level definition is just going to be, well, pretty much all of these. Every single cell here will tackle some sort of variable in the level that you can change or modify as much as you want. Starting off with the starting sun, this is very simple. You can set the starting sun to whatever you want. For example, 500 sun. This will set the initial value of sun in the level that you start out with. This is very much the most common usage of this is in vanilla timed event levels, where you start out with a ton of extra sun. It's worth noting that the value that you set here will also be added onto the upgrades value. In Reflourished, you can get up to 100 starting sun. The default is 50. With upgrades, you get 50 extra sun. So really, this value will be set to 550 in the actual level. This is just the default value that your sun will be set to without any upgrades. And you can see down here that it does says the bonus sun, which is the 50 extra sun that you get. You can enable or disable this pretty easily. And then there is also a starting plant food value, which lets you start with any amount of plant food that you want. You can set this to, like, say 1 or 3 or 5 is the maximum, because you only get up to 5 plant food per level. You usually won't be touching these, but it's worth keeping them in mind in case you do wish to do something regarding these values. Next, we got the cooldown multiplier here. The cooldown multiplier will take the value that you add here and multiply the recharge of any plants by that amount. If we set it to 2, for example, then the cooldown multiplier will be set to times 2. So if a plant takes, say, 10 seconds to recharge, now it will only take 5 seconds. And you can set this to whatever value you want. Again, this is another setting that you don't really touch unless you want to do some gimmick. And it also gives you the option to set it for specific worlds. If you want to deny a single world from getting extra recharge, you can do that. Again, it's very gimmicky, and it's not really something you care about more times than not. Then we have mower uses. We have no mowers, which you can set over here as well by simply turning off the mowers, as we learned in episode 1. And you have 1 use, 2 use, or infinite mowers. These are commonly used in Penny's Pursuit. 1 use, obviously, once you use a mower, it is completely gone and it will not return. 2 use means that after a mower is activated, it will return to the lawn, to the spot that it was in, and you will be able to use it again. And infinite mowers, you can never run out of mowers. Again, these were usually not used. You usually don't even have to touch this. You don't even have to set it to 1 use. You really will be just using it for 2 use or infinite mowers if for whatever reason you want your level to have those. Level number. This is actually mostly used for levels that have the level number variable. Let me show you. If I set it to, say, like 10, level number 10, if we go to the level code, you're going to see that the level number is going to be set to 10. This is usually used only for lawn strings and for internal stuff. So you pretty much don't want to touch it, or shouldn't have to touch it anytime. You can just set your level name to be here, or the level number, like, I don't know, My World level 1, and then you can just change it to level 2 or 3 or 4 as you want. Then we got scoring type, difficulty scaling type, and all jams. Scoring type, this is for scoring levels. I'm pretty sure this is how you set up scoring levels in Reflourished, but I'm not sure. The way that this works is that these are all variables that you set up for a scoring level. These have different values per tile, and you can set them up this way. Difficulty scaling type, this is only for pursuit, so don't worry about it, just don't touch it. All gems, just ignore this as well. I will cover how to activate all gems in your level in an upcoming episode. Alright, now let's cover plant level, zombie level, and grid item level. So I'll be honest, plant level, I do not recommend you touch this. We do not allow leveling in our levels. And also in Reflourished levels, you're not allowed to use plant leveling. So do not touch that, or if you post a level that has plant leveling, you will be warned in the Reflourished Discord. So please, I beg you, save me the trouble of having to warn you in the Discord server. I do not want to get you guys in trouble for that. Zombie level and grid item level, however, are completely fine to use. Zombie level, so you guys remember that epic quest that was in vanilla where the zombies will gain levels? Or how in Penny's Pursuit the zombies will get extra HP and attack per level or per difficulty? This is how you set that up. It has an entire formula here that explains how it works. I'm not going to get into how that works. All that you have to know is that you can set up value here, like say 2, and that will make the zombies a little stronger, faster, and they will eat faster. Be really careful with how you set up this value, because otherwise it can make the zombies way too strong. And because Reflourished doesn't have any leveling, it's pretty much impossible to deal with them unless you use some cheese strategy. Like how I did with one level, actually, which I don't think I've shown, but it's just not worth touching. Honestly, pretty much a ton of these here, you will only touch these settings unless your level has to use their gimmick. Same with grid item level. Grid item level simply affects HP, and you can just set that up so that, like say, if you want to give them 2 times the HP, you can do that. Go wild, that's totally fine. Piñata Party, Zombie Swamp, and Piñata Party rewards. These are in a similar camp to plant level, and same with Piñata Party up here. Please do not use this in your levels, because if you do, you will be warned. Well, with Piñata Party Zombie Swap, you won't be warned, but it will cause a lot of issues. What it basically does, like it says here, it allows zombie swapping to occur, where zombies are swapped to their holiday counterparts during holidays according to zombie swap list. For example, let's say the current holiday is Festivus. Any camel zombies, pianists, basics, gargantuars, imps, and other kinds of zombies will be swapped to their Festivus variants during that holiday. I don't recommend you touch it though. It will cause a lot of issues more often than not. Same with Piñata Party rewards and Piñata Party as a whole up here. Do not touch those, because again, you will get in trouble if your level is found to have any of these in the Reflourished Discord server. So do not use them, please. Down here we got shovel and disable upgrades. These are very simple. The shovel will be enabled from default. You can set it to not be enabled. Keep in mind, disabling the shovel will also disable plant food. So if you're going to make a level without the shovel, you need to keep in mind you will not be able to give your player any plant food that they can use. So try to create your ways and level around that restriction. Disable upgrades simply removes all the upgrades that the player account has. This includes C slots and starting sun and extra plant food. There are some levels which tend to use that, but more often than not, you will probably just keep this at the default, which is not disabling them. And now we get to custom sun dropper. To use custom sun dropper, you need to enable it. This sets up the first sun delay, the initial delay between the first sun appearing, the delay increase, which increases the amount of seconds that it takes for each sun to appear every time they appear. So let me give you an example. The first sun delay, this means that it will take 2 seconds for the first falling sun to appear. The initial delay is 4 seconds. So after that first sun appears, it will take 4 seconds for the next one to appear. Delay increases the amount of seconds that it takes for the next sun to appear based on the value. So in this case, the first sun takes 2 seconds, then it will be 4 seconds for the next one, and then the next one will take 5 seconds to appear. And then you also have some variables which you can change. The maximum delay, which sets a cap to the amount of seconds that it can take for a sun to appear. In this case, the maximum delay is going to be 4. And the variation in delay can give seconds in between whether it'll be less or more time that it takes for the sun to drop down from the sky. You usually just don't touch this because you don't really have a reason to change how quickly sun drops in a level. However, it is worth noting that using these values, you can recreate something like Altverz Neon Mixtape Tour, where sun starts to drop slower the more you progress through the level. That is achieved through the delay increase and the maximum delay. So keep that in mind if you want to use it. It's pretty cool. So if you take a look at the left here, you can see that there's a little plus sign. You can click this to enter the advanced settings. And as you can see, there is a lot of things here. These are all very more specific things that you can change that I don't recommend you change because like it says, it's very much advanced. As we can see, we have reward types and intro narratives and all this. You can ignore all of this, the resource groups, game features, and the loot. We're going to take a look at only five things here, actually. 5 things. We're going to take a look at 5 things here, which are these right here. The power-up set. This is how you can disable power-ups in your level. I honestly don't recommend it, but if you do want to do that, you can do that. There's also the option to leave it as default, but you don't have to do this, you can just leave it blank. Same goes for disabling plant food purchase and disabling plant boost. If you enable these, you will not be able to buy plant food during your level, and any Sand Garden boost that you have in your Sand Garden will not be able to be used in the level. On the opposite side of the coin, Boosterama enables the Boosterama game mode, which will give all of your plants infinite plant food. What's funny about this setting actually is that unlike the changes that we did in Reflourished, where you don't exactly get plant food effects for every single plant, Boosterama actually bypasses that. I've noticed that in conveyors, you do actually get complete plant food effects with Boosterama enabled, which is very interesting. So if you want to play around with that, go ahead, it's there. And finally, suppress sun spawn. As it says here, remove sun dropper and makes passive sun producers not produce sun. This is very much only useful for conveyor levels where you have things such as Bandit from Dark Ages, or you have Moonflower and you want to use them in a level. This setting allows you to set them in a level and they won't be producing sun that you cannot use. But as it says here, gold tiles still produce sun. There is a grid item called no sun _ gold tile. What this tile does is that it's basically just a gold tile, and it is able to activate importer, but it won't produce sun if you place a plant on top of it. So if you're going to make a conveyor, use this grid item instead of setting suppress sun spawn here, because it won't work as it says here. Gold tiles still produce sun, so be careful on that. All of these settings, don't bother with them. They're all just like extra things that you can change, but for pretty much every level you won't need to change these or any of this really. So we're moving past that into the objectives. So as you can see, it just says objectives here and then level objectives, and then there's a checkbox. If we go to initial here and try to set up some mold colonies, you're going to see that it tells you that mole colonies will not work unless level objectives is enabled. So what are these level objectives? So you need to set this to enable not just mold, but also endangered plants, lock and loaded, and last stand. I actually had someone in my comment section recently who was very confused about how you get last stand to work. We'll get into that in a bit, but this is one way that you can enable it. We'll get into the entire process in a moment here. But basically, for mole colonies here and for endangered plants, you're going to have to enable this by default. You cannot go past this because otherwise your level will not work. Same goes for lock and loaded, which we will also get to in a moment. But yeah, you can still enable this if you want to, even without any extra objectives like this, because there are more objectives in here. This is how this section is how you set up every single objective you could think of. First, we have a custom objective description. This is not exactly an objective per se. This simply adds a message in the objective screen at the start of the level. You can just say whatever you want, like that. You can just type that in and it'll appear in the game, which is very cool. There's some pre-selected messages that you can use here if you want. But this message, alongside whatever other main objectives you have, say mole colonies, will appear down here as the displayed objectives. This is what will show up in the objective screen at the start of your level. So keep that in mind. If there is an objective that your level has that is not shown in the objective text, definitely write it here so that your player isn't confused as to what they have to do. You can also write down a tip or something if you feel like your player will be very confused about what they have to do. These 4 here are for sun-related objectives. We got max sun spent. This is the limit of sun that you can spend in a level objective. Say, for example, 2,500. If the player passes this line, spend no more than 2,500. If they spend more than that, they lose. That's how you set up that objective. Minimum sun produced. This is the produce X amount of sun objective. Say 8,000. Produce at least 8,000 sun. Don't spend sun for X amount of seconds. You can set up the amount of seconds here. For example, 120. Don't spend any sun for 120 seconds. And the timer will display as 2 minutes. It will display as 2 minutes and it will count down until you have completed the objective. Very simple. Sun cap. Sun cap limits the amount of sun that you can store in your sun bank. If we set this to 300, for example, it'll say survive while only being able to store up to 300 sun. After that cap is reached, is completely gone. So be careful, player. These are all just sun-related objectives up here. And we have plant-related objectives here. Max plant loss, say for example 10. Don't lose more than 10 plants. If you pass this number, you lose. So that's how you set up that objective. Max plants at once. You can set this to say 15. Never have more than 15 plants. This is how you set up the don't have more than X amount of plants objective. Defeat X zombies in X amount of seconds. For example, an infamous one that I had to deal with. 5 zombies in 5 seconds. Defeat 5 zombies in 5 seconds. Very easy, but you know that story. Go watch Custom Level Grab Bag episode 9 if you want to know how that went. Pretty much you will spend most of your time up here in these modules because these are the ones that are used the most. Same with the flower line down here, flower line X coordinate. How this works is that if you go to your initial tab, you'll see that you have your X, your Y. It's asking for the X coordinate. So if we set it to say 4, flower line S coordinate 4, the flower line will appear here. If you want it to appear between lanes, you need to use a decimal. In this case, 4.5. And if we go here, obviously I cannot highlight it, but it will appear in between these two, right about here in the middle. So that's how you set up a flower line. And of course the objective will say, don't let the zombies trample the flowers. I completely skipped over the score objective here. It's very simple. Score to reach 300,000. Or is that 30,000? 300,000. And then you have to enable the scoring up here. Scoring type classic. And then you can see here that it's just coding. This actually just ends up being the launch string that's used in game to tell you the score that you need to reach. And then of course the target score failure is in case you fail, it'll show you this message. But you can change this, of course. You can just remove that and change that to whatever you want, I guess. But I don't recommend that. Just keep them default. That's how you set up a score objective, by putting the score here and enabling the scoring type up here. Destroy grid item objective. So this is how you set up the destroy X amount of grid items objective. You can see here that you can set up the grid item that you want. Say, for example, arcade cabinets, destroy 15. And then it's going to tell you here how the string works. It's going to be destroy 15, which is the grid items bracket here. 15 grid item type is this. So 80s arcade cabinet. And yeah, that's it. That's just how that's done. I know these explanations are pretty short, but that's because this is all pretty self-explanatory so far. These are just objectives. Apply conditions. Apply the condition, and then you got all the conditions here. These are either conditions that are done for plants or zombies, which is usually the one you're going to be doing. For example, butter. A total of 100 times. So it's going to tell you butter zombies 100 times. There are some conditions in this list that do not have any preset messages with them. So they'll show up weirdly in game, but they still work. If you want to know what any of these conditions are, you can always check the code names here and then scroll down until you find the condition list, which is right here, all the way at the bottom. And it'll tell you what every condition is. Feed zombies objective. So the feed, say 25, and then the type name, you just find the list and set up, I don't know, Dodo. Dodo, for example. Ice Age Dodo. And boom, that's it. And it'll show up like this. And then you can just set up a challenge description. Defeat 25 Dodos. Or actually, that's lame. Let's do drive 25 Dodos into extinction. Perfect. Excellent. And that's just how that objective will be counted down. You can set up a bunch of different zombies up here to count towards the objective. Usually you'll just be doing one, but if your level for some reason has multiple zombies that you need to kill, you can just set up the list here and it'll be okay. And then you can just set up the challenge description to tell you exactly what zombies you need to kill. Please do that. For the love of God, please do it, because that's very important. The timer level simply means you need to beat the level in the allotted amount of time. I'm pretty sure this doesn't work exactly, but so you need to beat the level before the timer reaches 0. Meanwhile, survive for X amount of minutes sets up a strict timer that will count down until it reaches 0, and the level is unbeatable until you reach that timer limit of 0. And finally, we have fill a horizontal row with, say, I don't know, 6 plants. You guys might remember this objective was used during Assault Airspace, the Arbiter X introduction, where you had to fill an entire row of plants. Once you do this once, the objective is completed. you can do this with as many plants as you want. You can even do a high amount, like 18. And I'm pretty sure this means that you have to fill up multiple rows, not just one. So that's good to know. Okay, clarification time. Beat the level in X amount of minutes. This is a timer that is set at the level where you have to beat whatever the level throws at you in that amount of time, otherwise you lose. So if you set this to say 8 minutes, you have 8 minutes to beat this level. This is very different from survive for X amount of minutes down here. If you set this to say 4, survive for 4 minutes, and this sets up the similar to the Altverz timer levels, where you have a set amount of minutes to survive, and waves come in kind of automatically. At some point they end, but yeah, that's basically the difference between these two. Beat the level in X amount of minutes, and even has a timer here that you can set up. The default being, of course, 7.8 plus, but you can also have some different timers for other mods here. But yeah, this is different from this one, as this one will make you lose if you don't beat if you haven't beaten the level by the time allotted, while survive for X amount of minutes simply counts down until it reaches 0, and then the level ends. Let's cover the waves portion of the settings here, which is all of this. So first we have escalation. Escalation is kind of interesting because it's basically doing waves automatically. Sure, you can set up waves over here, but let's say that you want to let the game handle the waves in the later portion of the level. You set up starting points here, an increment, and the max points in the zombie pool. So let me explain all of this. Starting off with the starting points, this is the amount of points of escalation that the level will have at the start of the level. By default, this will be nothing, but let's say it's 0 by default. You can actually set this to be a negative number, like minus 600, and then it'll start adding on to this value, which is the increment per wave. Every wave that ticks down will add the value that's set here, for example, 100. And let's say that the starting point is minus 500. So that means that on wave 1, it'll start minus 500. Then this will be minus 400, minus 300, minus 200, minus 100, 0, 100, and then it'll reach the flat wave. And it says here, there's a note that the flat waves have 2.5 times the amount of points that are currently in the wave. So this, if we got 100 points here, then this wave would be 200 times 2.5, or 500 points in total. Why am I mentioning 100 points? Well, if we go to the waves here, you'll see that the cost for each zombie is 1, 2, or 4. This is actually, like I said in the first episode, this is actually 100, 200, and 400, which is why you want to set these values to be hundreds. Otherwise, your escalation is pretty much just not going to do anything. So you want to set these values to the hundreds or thousands if you want to. Max points caps out the amount of points that a level will have. If you set the cap to say 1000, when any given wave reaches 1000 points, including flat waves, the level will not spawn more zombies than this allotted point count. So that brings us to the zombie pool. Here you have spots to set up whichever zombies you want. They can be zombies that are either here in your codename list up here, or they can even be outside the codename list, like, I don't know, balloon zombie. And then it'll use the internal code that's for that zombie to spawn it in the level. Balloon zombie, I think, is like 400 points, so it'll spawn if there's at least 400 points in the wave. So there's some nuance with escalation here. The first thing is that, let's say you have it set up where it's one instance of the basic and two instances of a cone head and one instance of the bucket head. Whenever escalation tries to pick a zombie to spawn, it is more likely to pick zombies that are repeated more times. However, most of the time, escalation will try to pick the highest point value of zombie, in this case the buckethead, because the buckethead has 400 points total, while coneheads only have 200 and the basic only has 100 points. However, this is random. Whatever zombies are spawned in the list here is completely random how they'll spawn. Like, let's say we have this setup where there's 4 instances of basics, 4 instances of coneheads, and 1 of buckethead. This means that the game is more likely, 3 instances of conehead. The game is more likely to pick the normal basic over the conehead, with the least likely being the buckethead, but there is still a non-0% chance that it'll spawn because it is on the list. If the level has enough points to spawn a zombie, it will try to pick it to spawn it in the wave. I hope that makes sense, because once you get the hang of it, escalation is very easy to work with. Most of the time I tend to only use 1 instance of a zombie, but you are given the option to pick multiple instances. If you only pick 1 instance, obviously it's going to be very random what zombie is picked between these. But if you have more instances of a zombie, it is more likely to pick the zombie with the most instances, while the others with less instances are less likely to be picked, but they will still be picked if they have a high point value that the waves can cover. So let me give you a practical example. Let's say our current wave, let's ignore these values here. Let's just say our current wave has 1,500 points total in that wave. Let's just assume that's our current value. And we have these zombies here. The game is going to try to fill out those spots the most that it can with the least amount of zombies most of the time. So that means, since there are 2 coneheads here, 2 conehead instances, it's going to pick the conehead to fill out the most amount of points there. So it's going to go, 1,000 points of coneheads. So that's 5 coneheads in the wave. Since they have a point value of 200, 200 times 5 is 1,000. And then it's going to see, I can spawn either 5 basics, or I can spawn 2 more coneheads in a basic, or I can spawn a buckethead and a basic, so on and so forth. That's how escalation looks at the game and picks a random option to fill out the allotted amount of points that you give it. In that 1,000 point example, it could even pick, say, 7 coneheads and 1 basic to spawn, or it could pick 3 bucketheads and then 3 basics, because the buckethead has a point value of 400, so 400 times 3, that's 1,200, and then it fills out the remaining points with 1 conehead and 1 basic, or 4 basics, or so like that. It cannot go past the maximum amount of points that are allotted for that wave. I'm going to leave a very detailed explanation here and examples and stuff. If you want to rewind to understand how escalation works, feel free to do that. I know it's a little complicated to understand at first, but once you get the hang of it, you can pretty much automate most of the late game ways with it. with some basic zombies, or maybe you can even throw in some very weak specials in there, just to make the late game a little more interesting and not having to hand make all of the waves in your level. Also make sure to set up number of waves here. This is the total amount of waves in your level. Let's say you have let's say you have 2 flags, 8 wave interval per each. So you want to set this to 16. You can also set up escalation plant foods. Any wave that has escalation in it will be able to give you plant food randomly. If you set this to say 2, 2 random plant foods will be scattered amidst the zombie pool here throughout the level, and they will arrive randomly. This is good if you want to give the player extra plant food without having to think about where it needs to go. More useful in conveyor belts or piñata party type levels, but I still recommend you set the where plant food needs to spawn in your level here, because that's just more reliable than having to rely on randomness to do it for you. Okay, let me cover the wave manager down here very quickly. All of flag zombie, if you enable this or disable it, it will disable the flag zombie that automatically spawns in every flag wave. This way you can either have a flag wave that doesn't have a flag, or you can set up your own flag zombie if you want to. Up to you. Rally flags is also related to this. If you tag this, every flag zombie in the level will become a rally flag. And you can actually set this over here. If you go into your code and you set up multiple waves, hold on, like I'm doing right now, you're going to see this little string down here that says flag wave veteran override types. If you set this value to 0, that veteran flag zombie or rally flag will become a regular flag zombie. If you set it to 1, which is what Elm does, it'll become a rally flag. So this way you can have a mixed amount of flag zombies. You can have a flag wave have a normal flag, and then another one have a rally flag if you want, which is very nice. And then we get to the minimum wave HP and maximum wave HP. If you've been watching custom level grab back, you'll know that these values are very important for level design. Minimum wave HP percentage, what this does is that this is the minimum amount of health points a zombie needs to reach to trigger the next wave. Max wave HP percentage is the same thing, but with the high end. What is the most amount of HP a zombie needs to reach to trigger the next wave? So what do I even mean by this? This is so confusing. So let me give you an example. If we set a value of 0.70 and 0.60, sorry, that's backwards. 0.6 and 0.7 for the maximum. Minimum wave HP of 0.6 and maximum wave HP of 0.7. These are the values that we use in Reflourished for the minimum wave HP, because it's not too quick, but it's not too slow either. What this value does is that it sets up the pacing in which waves arrive in a level. Thus, the lower these values are, the slower your level will be, and vice versa. In vanilla, these values are actually 0.7 and 0.8. You can prove this if you use a repeater on a basic zombie. Once it takes 2 hits from that repeater, the next wave will immediately trigger. I want to note that these values are for every single zombie in a wave. So these values control the general health percentage of the entire wave, not just one zombie. However, usually the first few waves tell you exactly how quickly a level is going to go. If, let's say this is like 0.50 as a whole, 0.5, 0.5, you can set these values to be exactly the same, and there'll be a very flat curve of progression in waves. This means that, let's say there's in wave 1, there's just a basic. Once that basic loses its arm, then the next wave will start, and so on and so forth. And then the next wave, let's say there's a buckethead, just a single buckethead. Once that buckethead reaches half HP, the next wave will trigger. And you can just see minimum and maximum wave HP like that. It's the minimum threshold that the zombies need to reach in their overall health to trigger the next wave. And you can set this as low or as high as you want. I personally recommend you leave these either completely blank, because that will use the default Reflourished values, which are, like I said, 0.6, 0.7. Or you can use the ones that I tend to use, which is 0.5, 0.6. This isn't too fast nor too slow, but it gives you just enough breathing room to not get overwhelmed, while the waves themselves are a little tougher to compensate. That's how I tend to do it, but you can experiment with it if you want. If your level has a very fast pace, you can increase these values to make the level be really quick. But you need to keep in mind the waves, because otherwise you might make the player too overwhelmed because of your waves and the fast pace. While, say, if you set this to a very low value, like say 0.25 and 0.35, which is also possible, it tells you here you can set it to as low as 0 and as high as 1. If you set these values super low, the waves will come in very, very slowly. And that can either tire out your player, or it can help them gain a huge advantage as they are able to set up their board very quickly while they aren't very overwhelmed by the waves themselves. Again, this is just how this variable works, and I highly recommend you play around with it depending on your level and see what works. But generally, leaving this blank is a good way to do things. First wave delay in seconds and huge wave delay in seconds. Again, if you watch Custom Roll Grab Bag, you will know exactly how I feel about these two and why you should ideally not touch them. But regardless, first wave delay, you can set the amount of seconds that the first wave takes to spawn. This can be whatever you want in seconds. It can even be a very low value so that the waves start pretty much immediately. I'm pretty sure the default value is either 7 or 8 seconds. I might be wrong with that, but if you want to increase that, go ahead. I don't recommend it, but you can do that. Huge wave delay, on the other hand, is a little more useful. What this does is that it controls how many seconds it takes for a flag wave to start. You guys, if you played Altverz, you might know that flag waves take a little bit more time to arrive there. It's like after the huge wave text disappears, it takes like about 2 more seconds for it to spawn. You can use this huge wave delay to set that if you want, or you can make it really short and make the waves come in really quickly. This does not control how quickly waves in general spawn. If you want to do that, you need to use minimum wave HP and maximum wave HP. These only control the first wave and the flag waves, nothing else. And finally, Buzz and Bruises. Do not touch this. Not because it doesn't work. I'm pretty sure it doesn't, but if it does, if you played Arena, you will know that this affects various mint family types. As you can see, it is completely empty. That's because we in Reflourished completely removed the ability for plants to have a mint family. It is internally stated in the code which mint family they're part of, but it is very janky and doesn't work. So I recommend you just completely ignore this. Don't touch it.